All right, thank you for joining us. This is another episode of The Volume. I am your host, Brad Franklin, the managing editor of the Jackson Advocate, and we are joined today by Shuwaski Young. He is running for Congress in the Mississippi Congressional Third District. We're going to be talking to him today about his campaign and some of the issues that are important to him. Shuwaski, thank you for joining us, first of all.
Brad, thank you so much for having me.
So my first question, I think this is probably one of the most pressing issues right now, especially for you getting ready to run for Congress. Let's talk about this redistricting issue. Just passed in the Mississippi House. They feel like it's going to pass in the Senate, where they're going to redraw the districts in the state. It's going to greatly affect the second district, as we know, in parts possibly of the third district. So, when you heard this news and you see what's going on with this redistricting, what are some of your first thoughts, and what do you think this is going to do to you as someone that's running for Congress?
Well, first and foremost, Brad, thank you again for allowing me to be on the program today. I'm born, raised, and educated here in Mississippi, and the state means so much importance to me, and I'm so happy to be running in this race. One of the things that has been very integral in this race thus far is over the past 6 months, we've been on the ground here in Mississippi, and very much so paying very close attention to the redistricting map and how it would actually be affecting this particular race, particularly for the third district. I know that, the proposal redistricting plans that were put forth, there are folks like, they're part of the NAACP, Congressman Thompson, that wanted Congressman Thompson to pretty much have Hinds County in the second congressional district. Right. I have been in talks with many House leaders and Senate leaders about that particular plan and kind of how this would affect, the particular race and the importance thereof. But we've always been committed to the point of it, regardless of what the House actually passed. And I know that 3 of the 4 Democrats that sat on the redistricting committee voted against this particular measure. I also know that it went through a party line vote through the House Senate. And that's how it actually ended up. I also know that the House Democratic minority leader was against this as well. But what we're actually, we're focused at is that this is going to be a race where we focus on rural areas, where we focus on metropolitan areas as well. And regardless of what these results have now come down to be with this congressional district map being redrawn in this way, where the northeast portion of Jackson, which is in Hinds County, of course, will remain in the third district, while other parts, such as Jackson State University, where I actually attended college and graduated from, will be in the second district with Congressman Thompson. We're still going to move forward. We have an amazing strategy that's put forth. We have some of the best team members and consultants in the entire country from all around the country that's helped me out, bringing this goal and vision to bear. And we're confident, that, we're going to use every voter engagement tactic possible, whether that's on the phones, direct mail, an amazing Canvas program, voter registration efforts, as well as direct media, and also ads that'll keep us in this fight and inform the voters about the importance of this race and to get out and vote.
Right. Now, talk a little bit about the inspiration for you actually running for this seat. You have worked in the Obama administration. You've worked in government on its highest levels. So what was your inspiration after achieving such great heights? Why decide to come back home, and why decide to run for Congress?
Yeah. So, I'm born, raised, educated in Mississippi. Mississippi is my first home. And my goal was always to return to the state to actually play a role in moving the state forward. I think that oftentimes many of us have noticed that a lot of us go off and do great things, get educated here in the state, and go off and do things for our own personal lives and our families, which is, an amazing feat, but sometimes don't come back to the state to reinvest that reciprocal experience that we actually got in other places back into the state. And I think that's why our state actually continues to kind of move slower than we like to expect. My goal has always been to come back to the state of Mississippi. It was in 2016, after the Hillary Clinton campaign was over, and I came home for a time period, thought about actually running in that particular race for that midterm in 2018. And I sat down with East Central Community College and did an interview with them where they had me on the front page of the Warrior Spring magazine. And I stated in that particular article that, one day I would return to the state and actually run for public office. I didn't know which particular public office I was going to actually seek. But looking at where we are in the country right now, where the biggest decline actually that face our state, we're last in every socioeconomic category known to man's measurement. I believe that I can best be used on the congressional level and the federal level to impact the state, not only with my business background, higher education background, working on multiple political races and multiple political campaigns throughout my career, and also working in the highest echelons of both state government at the Mississippi Secretary of State's office when I started my career, to actually working for the Obama administration of Homeland Security and working very closely with law enforcement. And also having served in the military, I think that I bring the best background to bear to be able to go up against Michael Guest in November.
Now, infrastructure is one of the issues that you talk about on your website. It's one of the issues that you're going to be looking to. And a lot of people who don't understand politics know that, a lot of the minutia that happens, the funding, the decisions for the funding for the state of Mississippi comes at that level. It comes at the national level. It comes with congressmen and senators at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. When you talk about infrastructure, talk to us about what you feel like your top issues are, because we know we're dealing with very serious infrastructure issues in the city of Jackson. There's a contingent, of course, at the state level of people that, are not big fans of the city of Jackson, not big fans of the Capitol, not big fans generally of the racial makeup of this state, as I'm sure you deal with in a lot of instances. What do you see as the biggest issue and the biggest hurdle that you see in helping to bring funding to the state of Mississippi as it relates to infrastructure?
Well, I think we have to have representation that represents the issues and challenges that face us right now. And not only here in Neshoba County where I'm at, but actually in places like Jackson, Mississippi, where you just mentioned. The crime rate, in Jackson is at an all-time high. Records being broken of murders that are happening in a particular city. And I've sat down with Mayor Lumumba when this campaign actually first started and said I would be happy to, and also honored to work with him as we, work together to fix these particular problems, both on the state level and also on a federal level and a municipal level where he actually sits and represents. But he's going to need some help. He needs folks that are there fighting for him at the congressional level where he can have the money to actually increase wages for police officers. Just this past weekend, yesterday was Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, and I put out a tweet talking about how our police officers basically make $36,000 a year on average, where the national average is somewhere upwards of $60,000, $65,000 plus dollars. It's issues like that. And when I talk to people around the state, both Republican and Democrat, white and Black alike, they are disappointed in their representation here in the Third Congressional District. Michael Guest, who's the current incumbent, actually voted against the infrastructure bill, which would have, provided millions and millions of dollars to our particular state. And also where places like Jackson and places like Meridian, who also faces terrible crime rates as well, can actually have a shot at, kind of fighting those battles in a better way. So I'm looking forward to working with Jimmy Smith, who's the mayor of Meridian. I've spoken with him on many different occasions and getting his support. But, getting back to Michael Guest and his vote against the infrastructure bill, it's not just that the infrastructure bill would have provided heightened funding. Thank God it's still passed now, of course. No thanks to Michael Guest. I'm pretty sure he'll end up taking some credit for that,
right.
Even though it's going to actually happen.
Right.
But he voted against it. He also voted against the voting rights bill. He also voted against the certification of the election in 2020. And we know what that's actually spawning in our country right now. But getting back to your point on infrastructure, when you vote against the infrastructure bill and things of that nature, it's not just that you're voting against funding for better roads, better bridges, better opportunities to create jobs. When we actually go out there and focus on these particular matters of infrastructure and workforce development, you're also voting against Medicaid expansion, which is something that, the Build Back Better bill is going to be part of as well. And that's something that people in our state who are seniors, people who are suffering from terminal illnesses such as cancer, can't afford to have a representative that's actually not voting in their best interest. I was just speaking with a white woman, and that's in Rankin County, his home county, and she pays $980 per day for a pill that she has to take for chemotherapy for cancer. Now, of course, with her Medicare insurance, the cost of that is a little bit lower. But what the actual infrastructural bill would actually do would give the government an opportunity to negotiate those prices with big pharmaceutical companies. And, when you look at a congressman that's voting against voting on party lines continuously again and again, a Donald Trump Republican, a Republican that is voting against a special interest that this state actually needs. I think that's why I'm the one that's best suited to actually bring that case to him as to why that's not a good idea for constituents of this state, and why that's not a good idea, especially for those who represent the folks or the residents of Mississippi Third Congressional District.
Okay. Let's veer off a little bit and let's talk about this crime issue. You talked to Mayor Lumumba, and say you talked to the mayor of Meridian as well. Your opponent got his name and made his name on being quote unquote tough on crime. in Madison County, in which a lot of instances, a lot of people will say that was just basically, throwing, huge amounts of jail time at people when they came before him in his court, and not really actually tough on crime, as it were. Looking at this issue as a black man from Mississippi, your opponent, running on a platform of saying that he's tough on crime based upon his history, what are some of your suggestions, and what are some things that you see could be better served to help to deal with the issues that we're dealing with our youth and the crime issues in the Third Congressional District?
Sure. Well, from an internal community standpoint, I think I'm going to be able to approach this in a few different ways. I'll talk about the Black family as a whole right now. It's common fact that 80% of our children in our community are born into single parent households. That's number one. So I think that, as a community, we have to be able to have leaders in our community that are there so these folks can have some mentorship in their communities as well. We have to have programs that are helping these single mothers actually deal with the fact of raising those kids alone. I think one of the hardest things that one can face is not knowing how you're actually going to put food on the table, having to work two jobs that keep you away from actually being with your kids and actually setting those standards and instilling those morals and values that have always made this country, more importantly, our community and the state, great. Now, that's just one piece of it. And I can go on and on and on and talk about that. But when we're talking about the injustices that are in the criminal justice system, there is no denying the fact that African-American men and men of color in particular from underserved communities have always disproportionately been more affected by the criminal justice system, more so than anyone else. Michael Guest is someone who wants to take us back to the good old days, and that is what he actually said in a tweet. That is not something that I'm just making up for a political punchline. I think that what we really fail to realize is that our communities have always believed in the rule of law. Our communities have always believed in order. Our communities have always wanted to make sure that we are making sure the next generation has a better shot at life than what we did before and a generation before that. What Michael Guest is actually representing is a disparity of trust between law enforcement and the African-American community. Now, do we have to actually make sure that we're not creating a police state here in the state of Mississippi where we're targeting Black communities and communities of color in ways that are disproportionately unfair to white communities and other communities alike? Absolutely. And I think that that's something that we definitely believe in and focus on. That's why my background in law enforcement, as far as with the Department of Homeland Security, having worked closely with the Joint Terrorism Task Force, I've worked with patriotism all my life. I believe in this particular country, and I believe in the force and the rule of law. But when you are actually creating an environment where folks are disproportionately being affected by the rule of law, where person A doesn't get the same shot at justice as person B, then I think that that's where we actually have a problem at. Now, going forward, I think also that we have to have leadership that is willing to speak out against this as well and bring some of the brightest minds in our country to bear who work in law enforcement, who work in sociology, who work in community development, to put forth programs and to put forth policies to make sure that policies like this are not going unchecked and that communities actually have a fighting shot and actually being treated fairly. I think that being someone who's lived around the country in Florida, in Virginia, in Washington, D.C., in Las Vegas, Nevada, and certain parts of California alike, and also in Mobile, Alabama, I've seen this work in other different places. And I want to be able to bring a new and brighter day to Mississippi where folks aren't scared to actually get in their cars and drive down the street for a gallon of milk without the fear of being persecuted unfairly.
Right. Let's talk about education a little bit. I think that's a big issue as well. Teachers, of course, as we know, are severely criminally underfunded and underpaid in the state of Mississippi. What are some of your ideas, particularly when we're talking about the rural parts of the Third Congressional District? What are some of your ideas to better improve the quality of education for all kids, whether they be in an urban, a suburban area, or in a rural area in Mississippi?
So we have to raise our standards, number one, and that means that we have to hire quality teachers that actually come from communities where these kids are actually represented as well. And we have to make it appealing for folks to actually go into those professions. The average school teacher right now is coming out making about give or take $5,000 for $30,000 a year for a career in teaching. And anywhere else in the country, that's just not so.
Right.
Mississippi has ranked last on the totem pole when it comes to education for a number of years that we all know, more than 10 plus years. And today we still rank about 48 when it comes to education here in the state of Mississippi. And we also, even though we rank that low, have some of the highest paid education superintendents of education in the country as well. That's a problem. Our state superintendent of education makes more than the governor. That's a problem. Right. So why is it that we're investing at the people at the top who are actually making all this money, but yet the folks who are actually in these school districts are disproportionately not even benefiting from these actual funds? I think that we also have to face the fact that through years of lack of opportunity and basic education oppression in these rural communities, that our students need an opportunity to be able to play on a larger playing field that other students in other states get to play with as well. We need more investment in our education system. We need more investment in our teachers. We need more resources put into our schools individually in rural communities as well, because there's no reason why someone who's already making $30,000 a year and having to get a second job after school ends still has to take their funds and go buy school supplies for students in their classroom, be able to have books that they actually need. In Winston County, which actually just got put into the Third Congressional District with this new redistricting map, which is the place where I attended high school at Knoxville High School and graduated from. You know, in the Louisville Municipal School District, those kids can't even take books home when they actually leave the classroom. So, you know, that's something we have to actually focus on. And we're not gonna be able to focus on that unless we have the money and the resources to do so, unless we have leadership that is updated and leadership that is modern minded in order for us to be able to move the system forward.
Segueing a little bit on the education issue, you know, one of the speaker's pet projects is trying to ban critical race theory in schools. You know, critical race theory that's currently not even being taught in the school system here in Mississippi.
Right.
But that's one of the issues that you could possibly be facing in the event that, you know, you win this particular seat. So when you see the conversations taking place on critical race theory and you juxtapose that against the issues that are prevalent as far as, you know, improving the quality of education, you know, what are your thoughts on this red herring that, you know, the Republicans seem to be chasing of critical race theory?
So this is something that I spoke about when it became, you know, a national conversation. People who work in the social justice arena have always known about critical race theories. It's mostly something that is taught to lawyers more so in law school than in classrooms around the United States. And even in the 2021 gubernatorial race in Virginia, this is what Republicans use to actually separate people and divide and conquer in the vote. It wasn't being taught in Virginia either, but yet that same strategy is being brought here to bear here in Mississippi. Excuse me, Tate Reeves, our governor, actually has this as a part of his proposed budget going into the Mississippi State Legislature this year, actually how to actually spend funds against this particular notion. And you actually have a lot of folks around the state and organizations that are actually trying to take civil rights history out of the books and things that nature are being taught. Look, here's the honest truth. We can't be better in the future unless we know where we come from and know our history. There are some dark moments in our history that this country is not proud of. We've never truly gotten past the racism that results from our original sin of slavery in this particular country. The Civil War was one of which that affected Mississippi and other southern states in ways in which that we can't even measure fully today, but we see it. We know that it was actually something that actually happened. And quite honestly, the South was on the wrong side of history. Now, does that mean that we all hate the South? No, we love the South. We love the fact that, you know, our history is ingrained. And today, because of respect and morals and values and faith and community and the values that actually connect us all, we're able to all get along and move this state forward. But we cannot, under any circumstances, try to eradicate the actual past that we actually know in our history books. And I think that the more that students know about this particular country and how we've actually overcame, you know, our dark history to a better and brighter future for all, I think that will be a good thing. You know, does that mean that, you know, we're going to be talking to kindergartners and first graders and sixth graders about this? No, that's not what that means. It is an age appropriate subject that must be taught in an age appropriate way. But when we put names like critical race theory out there, you know, it scares people, and it doesn't give us an opportunity to just review American history for what it is, which is American history. And I think that the more we're able to be honest about that, the more we're able to speak transparently on that particular matter, the better opportunity that we have not to repeat some of the moral mistakes of
Right.
biasness that we've made in the past as we move
Right.
forward in the future today.
Right. My final question to you is this, and we've spoken to a lot of people, and we're going to be doing a larger piece on this in the Advocate about Black leadership. There seems to be a sentiment among folks now, especially with the younger generation, of not having a lot of trust in leadership and in public officials and in politicians, particularly in the Black community. There's not a lot of young people in this new generation that are interested in getting involved with politics because of what they have seen happening, with the crazy videos that you've probably seen of the Board of Supervisors in Hinds County to, a lot of other things that exist. Politics is not something that a lot of these young people want to get involved in. And I think that's a bad thing because, of course, when we talk about how laws are made, how law works, and how things happen at the legislative level, we need to have people that look like us in these positions. So what can we do, or what do you think can be done as it relates to Black leadership to start instilling more trust back into a younger generation in public officials and in people who are in politics and dealing with the ins and outs of the lawmaking process in Washington, D.C.? What can we do to better that relationship?
Yeah, I have to be honest with people. We have to, really hone in on the fact that, if you don't utilize your right to vote, not only are you not fulfilling your side of the social contract here in this country to be heard and to be accounted for, we're also making a mockery on all the hard work that's been done by those who have came before us. The Martin Luther Kings of the world, the Malcolm X's of the world, the Fannie Lou Hamers of the world, who day in and day out, and many other countless other heroes that go unnamed,
right.
but day in and day out, experience traumatic situations. So we could have this right to vote.
Right.
But I think that today we face a disaffectment in our community because people simply say it can't be done. And one thing that has always reigned true in this country is that when the American people, and in this case, the people of Mississippi, want something to happen, it happens.
Right.
But if we are put in a position to where we are told that somehow this is unachievable, or somehow things will never change, or somehow a cloud of cynicism and pessimism controls us, then it won't be done. People will become disaffected, as they always are in situations like that. I'm running in this particular race because I want to be able to show people that there is someone like you, who looks like you, who comes from the same cloth that you come from, the same communities that you come from, and even probably even smaller than where you come from, that it is possible for us to actually have a better day in Mississippi and our voices be heard. Look at the progress that we're already making. Look at what's happening at my alma mater, Jackson State University, where we are now a beacon of hope for HBCUs across the entire country, where the white community wants to become part of what's actually happening on that particular campus. Look what's actually happening on a national level, where women of color are being empowered across this entire country, where companies like Goldman Sachs are investing $10 billion in African-American women. Look at this particular way in which we've actually been able to move forward by electing our first African-American president back in 2008 and re-electing him in 2012. But one of the things that we can't do is go backwards, and we have to be able to come together as a community, and we have to be able to work in a cross-pollinational type way with the white community. We have to be able to do the same thing across the board when it comes to working with law enforcement, with educational systems in this country, to be able to create programs to make sure we're uplifting our community so we can give hope. When we have politicians out there, both on a local level as well as a statewide level, and of course, there's not at all any statewide representative that's Black in Mississippi, even though about 38.9% of the state is actually Black, but yet we only have one federal representative who's Black, which is Congressman Thompson, and no one at the statewide level. I think that when you see a picture, it speaks 1,000 words like that. And we have to have people who are willing to get in the actual political arena. We have to have folks who are willing to learn about civics, be involved in their local communities, running in those local races for school board and city council and mayor and the state house. And by the way, I want to congratulate Senator Rod Hittman, who's now just been elected in the state house as well. I actually did some work with him on this campaign. But young folks who are willing to put in the work when they get off work to make sure that our community is going to be better and brighter than it was yesterday. But what we can't do is sit on the sidelines and not be interested in the political process. And that's why we're going to be focusing on a very strong voter registration effort to make sure people know exactly their rights to vote. Because just lastly, here in the state, there's about 20 some odd disenfranchising crimes. And if someone was so unfortunate in their life to, have been caught with drugs or paraphernalia and going to jail in a certain time for that, that's not one of them, right? So we want to make sure that folks know that they can vote, that they should vote, and what their actual vote actually means. But we got to give them somebody to vote for. And that's why I'm running this race as well.
There you go. Shuwaski Young, candidate for the 3rd Congressional District in the state of Mississippi, joining us here on the Volume. And we thank you. And of course, we'll be checking in with you. We know that you're going to be involved in the state of Mississippi, regardless of the outcome of the election. So we're definitely going to be having you back on to talk about the issues that are affecting the 3rd Congressional District and the state of Mississippi as well. And we appreciate it. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. God bless.